going to be moderating the event. I just want to give an overview of what we're going to be doing. We're going to start off with an icebreaker. Christy Matthews is going to lead us in that. And then we're going to go into our speaking session where we'll hear from Delonte Wilkins, who's a community organizer with Link Up, followed by Dr. Sabia Prince of Empower DC, followed by Deacon Ellis, who's a member of this congregation. So I'd like to invite Christy to lead us in the icebreaker.
Hi everyone. We're actually going to all stand up to do this icebreaker and form like a circle. So everyone come to the front and form the best version of a circle that we can. We can just form it as best we can. So the way that this icebreaker is called Finding a Link, or I Have a Link. And so the way that it works is someone's gonna start talking, I'll start. You're just gonna start talking about yourself. And when I say something, right. No, that's, leave me if you want to. When I start talking, I'm gonna start talking about myself. And if I say something that you also have in common with me, you say, I have a link, and then I will pass you the yarn. We're gonna try to make a live web. It'll make a lot more sense once we start. So I'll start. As you all know, my name is Christy Matthews. What can I say? I was born in Greensboro, North Carolina. I moved to DC in 2006. I am a middle child. I have one older sister and one younger brother. No one has any. I have a link. And what you're gonna do is you're gonna keep a piece when you get this straight. I was like, come on. That's a middle child. Middle child. Only one with middle child syndrome? You are not the only one. Other. What was your link? Middle child. That's all.
My name is Nikichi Feaster. Let's see. I'm a mother of an adult. I'm a writer. I'm a creative.
What's your link?
Writer.
Hey.
Adult, right? I know you.
Fraser White. I am a Maryland boy who moved to DC. I am a father of 3. I am the husband of a beautiful wife. I am seeking.
What's the problem?
My name is Delonte Wilkins. I'm an organizer.
Keep a piece.
All right now.
All right, other side, y'all gotta come on, join us.
The link was an organizer.
Okay.
My name is Kimberly Mitchell. I'm a native Washingtonian.
I wanted to hear more, but okay. Native Washingtonian, grew up in the suburbs, unfortunately, but it's in my blood. Went to New York for 6 or 7 years, came back.
We're trying to see how we're all connected.
I love it.
I'm Mary Frances Fees, Caitlin's aunt, in for the weekend visiting, and love children. I have none of my own. I love them.
Here, pass it.
What was your link?
Don't have any kids.
All right.
There's many in my life.
Okay, grew up right on Capitol Hill. Here in the parents. 2 sisters. All right.
I think it's supposed to come under, actually.
Okay, well, you can
I can take
do
it.
it however y'all want. Make the link.
That was good.
Sausage is made.
Two sisters. I'm originally from.
Say your name.
Oh, sorry, Alice. Originally from Pennsylvania. Spent some time living in the Midwest before I came to DC. I work for the government.
You say anything, your favorite color, what you like to do?
Favorite color, depending on the day. Purple or green.
Have a link? Okay. All right. My name is Dana White. I'm married to the finest man on this earth. Okay, right? I'm a teacher, I'm an educator. I've been teaching for over 25 years, DCPS. I'm also teaching private school, that's how we're connected. I've taught in charter schools, so I love children. I love children, and I love people. Nobody else?
I love people.
Okay, my name is Barbara Wood. I also have several links, but they just beat me to it. But I have some kids in my life, some grandkids in my life. I also love children. I love working with children.
I have a link.
Okay. Love working with children. Oh, the piece. Okay. Yeah. So my name is Lolita Ball. I work with the government, DCPS, I should say. I have 4 children, 2 girls, 2 boys. Okay. My favorite color is red.
Food, would you like to cook? Would you like to cook?
Okay, I do love cooking. My favorite.
Oh, there we go.
There you go.
What was your link?
Cooking. I'm Noah. I'm initially from South Florida, Fort Lauderdale. I'm currently finishing up a degree at GW.
Probably.
What was your link, GW?
For GW.
All right.
All right. I finished up in GW. I am Fraser White, Lionel Fraser White. I'm the 3rd. I'm an artist.
Link. So who we have left? We have like 3 people left.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay, I'm Sabia. I'm a native Washingtonian. I'm an artist. That's the connection. Former educator. My mom was a teacher.
I believe.
Okay.
What was your link?
My
I
mom's
already
a
know.
teacher.
For those who know. Your mom's a teacher.
Come on, join on in.
Yeah, see what's going on.
Describe themselves, and when they have something in common with you, say you have a link.
If you hear something that I say that applies to you, then you can take it.
Okay, all
So only that. My name's Caitlin Kashalova. I am an attorney. I like being active and being outside. My favorite color is also purple. No one likes to be outside.
I do, but I already have a screen.
Yeah.
I'm thinking of going back to law school.
Okay.
So you're just gonna introduce yourself and then just tell us about you until someone has a link.
All right. My name is Jeff. Jeffs. That was too easy, right? I'm in healthcare marketing. I'm from North Carolina.
Oh, I had that, but I'm already linked up.
I enjoy going to church and Bible study on Tuesdays. I have
Now
3
somebody.
sisters.
You want to have older sisters? Keep going. Favorite color? What you like to do in your
I'm a
free?
grill master.
No.
Time
Time of the year.
I got me on that one? I like to draw and paint. I have a niece and nephew.
Okay.
I don't have any children. I'm not getting.
We're trying to get 2 more people. There's only 2 people left, Billy. So you gotta link. You're trying to link to 2 people.
We got 2 people.
I like the Pittsburgh Steelers.
You don't like it?
I said it. I'm saying, see, my link is so much different than you. When you hear my story, I'm supposed to be the last link. Okay, put it like this. You know what a phoenix is?
Yeah.
I'm a phoenix. basically you
Tell
are
us your
looking
name.
at. I'm Perry Douglas.
All right.
I'm a ghost. I was supposed to be dead when I was 16. I'm in school. I've never finished a grade in public school in my life. I've come from poverty so extreme that you wouldn't even believe that it's American poverty. And I just got into advocating through the school, so I'm a little different. You'll see that I'm a little rough around the edges, but if you get to know me, you'll find out that I'm truly sincere about where I'm going. I'm 58 years old. I'm just getting a high school diploma.
Yay.
But I've done every trade and had my own business. I have one eye, I'm black, I'm disabled, and I'm an advocate.
Amen.
Advocate.
That's you.
I'm an advocate.
So, Yasmina, the way we're going to close it out is you're going to try to find a connection with me, which shouldn't be hard because you know me pretty well. So, tell us about yourself and try to connect with me.
Okay, my name is Yasmina. I do a lot of housing organizing work.
That was too easy. Something else. Wait.
Let's see, I work on the weekends a lot. I like hanging out with friends.
There we go.
Okay.
And so the purpose of this activity is that, so you can keep going. If sometimes the way I do it is like you can grab the string multiple times if you want, but I know we're a little tight for time. But the purpose is to show that no matter how different we are, no matter how we come from different spaces, we all have a connection, we all have something that we have in common, and we can build on that to make a better future for ourselves. So look at our beautiful web and how we're all connected to each other, even though we have very different experiences. And that's amazing. No, I didn't do that. All right, I hate rolling the back. I'm sorry. I'll show you someone who likes to do that. Oh my God, I hate rolling the back. Yeah, is it?
Just sit down. I'll put it to my chair.
No.
Well, y'all
I'm sorry. I appreciate it. I hate rolling I appreciate it. See, I appreciate it.
Decided to have a boyfriend, so I leave it alone. I think I just put my foot on my mouth, but I'll leave it.
Good job.
My grandmother.
It's just like.
I think I forgot. Well, my daughter looks like I forgot her.
Really?
She does a little bit, but
Looks more like your dad.
yeah, and like the grandbaby.
Deacon Ellis, do you want to see this? So Pastor White already gave us an overview of why we're here, but we really wanted to have an honest and intimate community conversation on how did we get here, how did DC turn into what it is right now, how does the process of gentrification take place, what does it mean when an entire culture is completely displaced from a city. And we're seeing gentrification happening at a rapid rate, not only in DC, but in every major city across the United States. And we know that this is a manifestation of the economic system that we live in, where private corporate forces are on the prowl for money. And the politicians that are in office are lining their pockets with money from big-time developers who are in charge of housing policy. Housing policy is being created not based on a human need for housing, but rather based on how much money can be made off of exploiting the working poor. So we have a panel today. We're going to start off with Delonte Wilkins. Like I said, community organizer with Link Up, and he's going to do a reading called The State of Our City.
Hello everyone, like she said, my name is Delonte Wilkins. and I wrote an open letter to DC, and I believe I'm also organizing for these events, and I believe as we continue to do these events, we would like for folks to definitely submit like open letters and things so we can get like real accurate stories and so, or just what people feeling. So this is my open letter. I think I titled the letter to exile, but I don't know. Either way, this is what it is. What does gentrification mean to you? I know what it means to me. DC has the highest intensity of gentrification of any U.S. city with the most gentrified neighborhoods in the country. I live in one of those neighborhoods, and I have since been exiled from my own city. Some call gentrification a good thing, but fail to recognize the mass displacement of the working poor that takes place during this violent process. I grew up on 1st Street in Northwest DC, where I experienced the violence of gentrification. I remember exactly how it happened. I remember the first new white colonizers and settlers that moved in my Bloomingdale neighborhood, which was majority all black, just a little over a decade ago as I was growing up. In my teenage years, we had a shared community park in our backyard that we called the Cave Yard. That's where my mom grew up and played too. I remember how the first white man moved to the neighborhood with his dog, immediately got involved in a community association and offered to pay out of his pocket to fix the Cave Yard up. I remember the specific details about this white man and how he successfully pushed us out of our safe space, a space where we played football and basketball. He came to us regularly telling us that we couldn't play there any longer because he had just invested in the grass out of his own pockets and we were messing it up by running on the field. This is our neighborhood, we replied to him. Who are you? And we kept doing us, playing football. He began to physically stand in our way so we couldn't play there anymore. We kept playing out there when he wasn't around, but he was mostly always around. And when he wasn't around, he started getting the police to come around and enforce his demands by harassing all of us kids. One day we found out that there was glass thrown all over the football field, so we couldn't play out there anymore. Eventually we stopped playing on the football field and restricted ourselves to the basketball court on the cement of the Cave Yard area. The police began to come to the basketball court in response to the complaints about the noise. Then it was complaints about so-called drugs, and then it was four-way blitzing of every entrance and exit into the Cave Yard. We got harassed daily for hanging out behind our own houses. Eventually our basketball court was pushed down and broken by some young white guy we witnessed knock it down and run. We moved to start hanging on the corner because the Cave Yard was just not ours anymore. It belonged to that dog walker and later to more dog walkers. We would go back and forth from Cave Yard benches to 1st Street where we would just hang out and just talk trash to each other. The worst we would do as kids was smoke weed on the benches in Cave Yard or maybe shoot some craps with our dollar bills. We were legitimately innocent group of kids. We came from a good neighborhood of working class people who took care of each other. With daily police jump outs in the name of war and violence in a community that at the time had not seen any homicide rates for a significant period of time, always made me wonder, why were they bothering us? We had a dedicated police officer that made it his business to come and harass us daily. He didn't bother to hide his racism, and he used to ride through the alley chasing us anytime he saw us. If he caught me driving my car in the neighborhood, he would begin to try and chase me so he could pull me over. He pulled me over while I was driving one day and gave me over $1,000 in bogus traffic tickets. That I had to go to court to get thrown out. He even came to court to defend the bogus tickets, which the judge eventually threw out. We were faced with all hands on deck policing, jump out cops, out of uniform, bogus neighborhood criminal gang conspiracy that resulted in arrest for being associated with people who may have been involved in something the police found illegal, but we knew our whole lives. Next thing I noticed, just like being startled after turning a light on and seeing roaches everywhere, I walked out in my neighborhood and colonizers were everywhere. Walking dogs, no kids, just dogs. The community I knew was gone before I could process what happened. That's what happened in my neighborhood. What happened in yours?
Wow. Thank you.
Thank you, Delonte. Our next speaker is Dr. Sabia Prince. She's an urban anthropologist, activist, and artist. who has been researching and writing about African American life and culture since the 1990s. As a scholar who is also a native Washingtonian, she has been consistently concerned about the plight of blacks in cities in general and the conditions facing DC residents more specifically. Dr. Prince is the author of 2 books and numerous journal articles, and she has had numerous media appearances, including MSNBC, Al Jazeera English, WPFW, NPR, and others. Dr. Prince is also an abstract artist whose work explores issues of inequality, belonging, personal growth, and environmental justice. Please give her a hand.
Good afternoon, everybody. That was powerful. Thank you for sharing that. Very upsetting. Okay, if I bore anybody to death, it's only my fault, so don't blame the organizers of this event. Thanks for having me, and thanks to Pastor White and to Mr. Wilkins and Yasmina. So I'm going to just put some of this in context, I guess, and share a little bit about what I learned as a researcher on this topic. And I want to start by just conveying how we conceptualize gentrification in the social sciences and also among many organizers and activists around this issue. What we do is we do not take gentrification out of its historical context or out of its political economic context. That's like a super no-no. In fact, I really look at it as an anthropologist who's been kind of talking to people about this for quite a while now, is I look at gentrification as the culmination of how black and brown people have been marginalized in cities in the United States. And those forces that have marginalized us include redlining, blockbusting, restricted covenants, all other kinds of housing discrimination, as well as wealth inequality and income inequality. So basically I'm talking about structural racism and classism. That's kind of like the root of gentrification. And these forces have made black and brown communities and the businesses that serve them very vulnerable. It's put them on shaky ground. And that shaky ground is the thing that then justifies gentrification. So the historical reality is that the communities facing gentrification today, they've really experienced neglect and underinvestment. And so that historical reality highlights the fact that gentrification is about policy. Okay, that's where it starts. It's not the natural order of things. It's not just, you know, how things naturally just kind of shift over time. That's not what it is. Government inaction and the exploitation of working class communities, that was and still is policy. And the answers to those impacts and the impacts of those things include a segmented labor force, which black and brown people have had to deal with for many, many decades. Dilapidated housing. In DC, we had alley dwellings, which were unique. Some other cities have had that as well. But the answer to all of that has been initially urban renewal. That is, let's just tear everything down. And then in the wake of urban renewal, we see gentrification. And frankly, gentrification is just another way of tearing things down. Various forms of legislation oriented around alley demolitions and during the 1930s, and other kinds of legislation during the 50s. That all helped to remove black people from places like Georgetown and Foggy Bottom and parts of Southwest Washington, D.C. So again, it's policy, whether it's a policy of neglect, whether it's the policy of demolition, whether it's the policy of corporate welfare, or, you know, subsidies to companies that are going to displace black and brown people. Those are all factors that we don't want to overlook. So that's kind of where I start as a social scientist. I start from there, and then we move forward looking at this thing again as a cycle. When you put it all together, there are other forms of marginalization too. When you really think about it in that way, there's no reason why Anacostia has to be any different from Chevy Chase. I mean, the only difference is we're talking about under-resourcing, and we're talking about decades and decades of discrimination, and that there are communities that have been the recipients of all these subsidies and all this corporate welfare. We're talking about white communities. So in addition to being a cycle, and I guess let me back up just a smidge and say that after the neglect that I've just laid out, it's followed by an influx of capital. The capital is in the form of bank loans to purchase a home, to improve your home, to get your business, popping or whatever the case may be. And the people who have access to those capital then follow it. So that's also a part of that cycle. So in addition to that, there's the piece of uneven development. And frequently I get this question from journalists, and I really like to drive this point home because they ask me, and I think some of them are very, they're concerned, they share some of the same concerns that we have. And so they may ask this question in a hypothetical sort of way, and that is, if a community is being reinvested in, isn't that a good thing? And so my response is always to follow up with more questions.